Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Hey, good evening. It is the 30th of July, and we've got some random stuff to talk about today. We've got a GOP congressman who died because he went to a giant-ass rally and wouldn't wear a mask. The vice president's bus careened into his motorcade twice today. I don't think it was just the bus. I think it was another vehicle the second time. Or maybe got those backwards. Let's see what else happened. You know, just a bunch of crazy shit. Kind of stuff that you almost wouldn't believe. But you know what? It's 2020, and 2020 has been full of crazy shit you wouldn't believe. Just the other day, a train derailed on a bridge and then set an industrial zone on fire. I think it gets worse, but I can't quite remember because too much weird crap has been happening in the past couple of weeks.
Well, GDP has shrunk in Q2 at an annualized rate of 32 and some odd percent.
Ugh.
Original projections in May were for the GDP to shrink in Q2 by upwards of 50%. So we may still be shrinking.
And
that's just what's about, because obviously this particular administration is not forthcoming with information, but especially about the finances of the country, they're definitely not forthcoming. I think it's like one of those. It's one of those things that when we're looking at the hydroxychloroquine. Pushing by, what's her name? Oh, that was the thing we forgot about, the Dr. Stella.
Oh, yeah. Space demons or whatever. Demon semen.
No, sperm.
Demon sperm, that's right.
Yeah. Dr. Demon Sperm. Yeah, so now that we have Dr. Demon Sperm over here, which is crazy because the one black person, not the one of the two black people they're willing to put forth is out here talking about demon sperm. And it's like, why of the millions and millions in the, if you add in Africa, over 1 billion black people, how do you find the one talking about fucking demon sperm to put in front of everybody? And then I got to go defend black people for Dr. Demon Sperm, and then explain to all the black people or to white people like what does Dr. Demon Sperm represent to black people? Then we all got to say, none of us know Dr. Demon Sperm. This lady ain't part of our community. She just came out of nowhere, fucking pediatrician, and trying to say, oh, I treated 350 COVID patients. Motherfucker, more people have died than that in the last 24 hours. So
seriously,
if you're talking about treating 350 people, that's great.
Well,
I'm denying that she has, but that's nowhere near enough to say this specific group is representative of the entire population, to say this is a peer-reviewed study that proves these things effective against COVID. Even if she did treat 350 people and they all recovered, that's not enough people to fucking say that's a study. That's nowhere near enough people.
Well, speaking of pediatrics, they're finding that children tend to have higher viral loads than adults, and you know, the committee's not back on this yet, but it seems that there's going to be a larger impact on this than people realize we've done a pretty good job of keeping the numbers low for young people. Well, by young people I mean children, but it turns out that they have more of this stuff in them, and for whatever reason, oh wait, so as Cheeto Mussolini has suggested, we might have to delay the 2020 presidential election, which he doesn't have the power to do. And if he doesn't vacate office by the 20th of January, then the Speaker of the House becomes the leader of the country. But uh, there's just so much crap going on. They changed the handling of the data, so it's a private entity. It's not the CDC doing the primary data handling, and so the numbers, they look like they're getting cooked in the red states, and it doesn't make sense because the red states are all experiencing higher daily case reporting and daily death count, and it's just keeps getting worse. And so their version of handling the situation is just turning a blind eye.
The one of the most tragic aspects of touting that particular doctor's beliefs and purported treatments as valid and on par with the research of pharmaceutical companies attempting to create a vaccine or create a treatment or to test a treatment, or other NIH studies or other longitudinal studies of other infectious diseases, is that it's essentially giving a very powerful platform to people who will be given the opportunity to invalidate or undermine more actually valid scientific research. So this is the answer to Dr. Fauci, essentially. This is the person that people in various levels of executive power would rather have the public listen to. And if there is a significant number of people who would rather listen to someone who talks about the things that this particular doctor talks about and believes, and they feel more comfortable with those ideas over the very rational, methodical, scientific method-based approach to epidemiology and the studies of infectious diseases, that in and of itself is a tragic image and picture and representation of the state of education in this country.
Yeah, one of the things that um I'm not the one that came up with the term, but when you're fact shopping, it comes down to um suddenly these people want to believe a doctor when the doctor's spouting the nonsense that confirms their bullshit concepts. But until the doctor actually says something that they want to agree with, they're going to ignore every single doctor. Then, of course, Dr. Demon Sperm comes along, and this is the one they're going to fucking, you know, string along as their fucking representative.
Well, on top of that, see, I didn't even listen to what the person said. I just read about it after the fact, and I saw an image of a bunch of people wearing white lab coats standing outside of a governmental building. And I thought to myself,
Well,
this looks staged. Like, this looks like a photo op. People are almost conditioned to believe people who wear white lab coats.
right.
In commercials, where a particular dietary supplement that isn't necessarily FDA approved or hasn't necessarily been tested, or even if it's just for something to help with stress relief, or if it's like a physical therapy item, or like that therapeutic weighted blanket that warms people. There was that, I believe you shared a commercial frame of somebody getting a leaf blower blown at them to demonstrate how weighted the blanket was and how it wouldn't simply fly off of somebody no matter how much external interference was presented. But I think one of the most striking aspects of that image was that the person who was manning the leaf blower was wearing a white lab coat, and that was somehow supposed to give a certain level of credibility and validity to somebody who literally just probably got like came in off the street or from some sort of acting commercial actor agency and is in no way licensed to actually provide therapeutic advice about anything and is basically given a leaf blower. And in this case it seems to be a person who doesn't necessarily, based off of what they say publicly and what they believe and the information that they try and get their patients to synthesize and carry around with them in their own lives. I mean, it's highly irresponsible to teach things like that. And I think it's just a marketing ploy, and it's a front.
Oh, most definitely. And that's kind of where, when it's presented that way, I think the only people who sort of look at um, lab coats as representing science are people who've never actually interacted with science or scientists. Um, I don't know if I've ever actually worn a lab coat in a lab. I think even when working in like an fMRI lab where you can't, I think they might have had um, stuff to. I don't even know. There might have been like like anti lead like lead vests.
The last time I wore a lab vest or a lab coat was in high school when we dissected fetal pigs. So that
So
was like 20 plus
We didn't
23
we
years
didn't
ago.
lab coats when we dissected pigs. Like that's like shit. Like they don't have lab coats for everybody. Like that's just not something that most labs have. Like for because then if you have them and everybody's using them between students, if you're actually dissecting shit, you're gonna have to have that shit washed in between classes in order for them to stay white.
Yeah,
Like
the one I wore wasn't white anymore. It was very old. I think it was like lab coat theater.
yeah, lab coats don't stay white if you actually use them, and that's where sterile environments need full body suits that have respirators and shit. Like that's not, if you're in a sterile environment, a white coat doesn't make you sterile.
No, it doesn't.
So there are, in pharmaceutical and biologic product manufacturing and testing and environments where chemical agents are being mixed and exposed to the general environment, there are often lab coats that are worn in conjunction with protective eyewear and hair nets and sometimes beard nets, booties, gloves. There are different classes of sterile environment based off of what's called the ISO. And if I think class 6 is the most stringent, and it has a very specific amount of microbial recovery that's allowed. And those are the ones where you have to wear the full bodysuit, and that's typically where aseptic fill and finish of products that are going to be injected into people are typically performed. So,
So for the record, ISO is like the International Organization for Standardization, and they put out different standards for different industries. So there'll be different ISO standards for medicine, different ISO standards for like cybersecurity. So I actually helped create an ISO standard for blockchain definitions internationally. So that's like again, there's all these different numbers for ISO standards. So it's like, like he's saying, the ISO standards that will be one level's lab coat, but that's not going to be the only thing. It's going to be lab coat in addition with other, maybe scrubs or whatever. There's going to be different levels of what that protection means, but it's like almost never going to be just like if you're wearing a lab coat, you just can't throw on a lab coat over the shit you're wearing and have it work in like 9 out of 10 cases. There may be one case where that's going to work, but it's probably like the least scientific.
So there are 21,000 ISO standards, and some of them have substandards, or not subgroups of standards. Like ISO 9000 2005 and ISO 9000. Wow.
Well, a lot of them end up conflicting too.
Yeah.
Which is the part, like, so that's where you end up, especially in government infrastructures. You'll have conflicting standards that they have to follow, where you're like, you have to use this type of wire here, but the other standard says you can't use that wire. And then you're like, well, what do I do? So you have both. And then you create like, yeah, you end up with, that's why government redundancies end up happening, is because they end up having to follow conflicting standards. And when you learn that that's part of the reason shit is like not efficient, it you don't necessarily forgive it, but you feel for the people who have to follow the rules, those like that are often conflicting. Not police, fuck police, but administrative people in government.
So the ISO Cleanroom Class 6 classification is ISO 14644-2015. And at that stage of clean room, microns it's basically micron size that's being measured. And you're supposed to have HEPA filtration that is 99.99% efficient. And it should be they're like antimicrobial measures, and organic matter growth is supposed to be mitigated at the highest level.
Good grief. It looks like there's ISO 1 through ISO 99999.
And like Chris was saying, it's cross industrial.
Good grief.
One thing, when I was working in fMRI studies, I didn't necessarily have to wear a lab coat for any of that. What I had to make sure was that I wasn't carrying any ferrous materials with me on my person or on my clothes when I would enter the room with the fMRI.
Yeah, if any, like you can't have tattoos.
Right. Like, yeah, if you have tattoos, they might start burning.
Yeah, because some tattoos have in them that will then get pulled out of your skin. Like, you can't be a welder, a former welder, and go in there, because welders often get like little metal flakes and that fly off and go into their skin or potentially their eyes, and that thing will pull the fucking metal right out of their skin, and it will not feel good. And that's like, when you have to learn all the regulations as to who's not allowed in that room. They're not even allowed in the fucking room, let alone in the machine.
Yeah, as part of the informed consent process, we gave people a questionnaire about their history that covered a lot of those considerations.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed and picked up along the way was that if I was getting scanned, or if somebody's getting scanned, they don't want to cross their arms or their legs while that's occurring, because they're essentially absorbing energy, and that energy needs to be able to exit the body as well. And crossing the arms and legs will actually cause your feet or your hands to go numb.
Looks like red and anything containing lead, antimony, beryllium, chromium, cobalt, nickel, and arsenic. These are the colors that contain, or these are the metals that are found in tattoo pigments and cause problems with magnetic resonance, or any kind of machine that has a highly powerful magnet involved.
So when he's talking about crossing his arms, it's even crazier in that the whole thing is, because there's just free floating. It's not even really free floating. There's being directed, but in the process, there's free floating charge. So if you create a circuit by accidentally closing your arms, you're actually, because humans are conductive, you have the potential to create a charge. And there, like, the potential of that for someone in there, they're gonna get burned because they're actually gonna it's effectively getting a little lightning
They're
storm.
turning into a capacitor.
Yeah, because the fMRI is I think it's like 1.3 tears, or I forget the measurement that Teslas. But it's like the actual field that they have in that room is as strong as like the Earth's magnetic field at scale. So that's why it's like it's a really, really strong magnet that's super powered, that if you again, if you cross your arms, that it's not going to happen immediately. The charge builds up because it's like residual, there's just free floating ions in the air around that fucking magnet that over time, if you're just not paying attention, that's why again they warn people about it a lot so it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think the fMRI that we worked with when I was at IU was like a 3 Tesla or 4 Tesla.
Oh, Jesus, that's
it was probably the same machine because I was the first class that worked in it. I just couldn't remember how many Teslas it was. It was like
I think the first one from '95, I think was around 1.5 Tesla or something like that.
1 Tesla is equivalent to 10,000 Gauss. 3 Tesla scanners emerged in the late 90s.
Yeah, because the original ones were MRIs and not fMRIs.
Yeah.
And that's, for instance, like the functional magnetic resonance imaging is when you can actually see the brain images in real time versus magnetic resonance imaging, which basically are taken in like 10-minute intervals. So you'll have some activity happening and you'll see what's happening over the course of 10 minutes and see effectively the final activation points, but it's not the same as fMRIs, which are basically scanning in real time. Like you'll be asked a question or be asked to do a task, and they're looking at your brain in real time, which is just, that's why it just takes more magnets, because what it's doing is aligning the hemoglobin in your body to the point that it's able to, because you have enough iron in your blood, that it can then align everything. Then it can get fixed points from which to measure the frequency movements to then look at the brain activation in specific areas. So it's a whole lot going on as to why when they're aligning your hemoglobin, you definitely need to make sure you don't have extra metals in your body anywhere, because that magnet is strong as fuck.
One of the most curious discussions that I encountered was by somebody who didn't necessarily agree with the whole fMRI paradigm. I think one of the arguments, or one of the more basic ways to approach a counter argument to fMRI validity, was that it was akin to phrenology, because essentially you're polarizing the molecules in the brain when they're flowing during a specific task in neuronal populations, and then you're generating a signal once the energy is being emitted from those particular molecules when they're done being polarized. And then you're reading that and you're establishing a statistical level of significance to determine the movement, or what that movement actually means. So some of the arguments were that, the fact that you have to determine a statistical significance for what the movement of the blood or what the movement of the molecules during a task actually means is a bit arbitrary. And it's just basically saying, oh, well, you do this and this part of your brain lights up, but does it actually mean that that part of your brain is responsible for what you're doing? What else is going on?
That person has no idea what they were talking about, mainly because that's only half of what's going on with fMRI, because what ends up happening is you need a baseline activation in anyone's brain to then measure what's happening during the test. So that's obvious. But what he's missing in that framing is, if you only test one person, yeah, you're not going to understand across multiple brains if there